Hey everyone, this is Timika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. So say that 10 times fast, right? So today is June 4th, 2021, and I am loving this weather that we are getting here in Tillamook, Oregon. It is so clear. You can see the mountains clear, you can see the water, the trees are glowing. So I'm definitely loving that. And I heard this morning that there was a city close to an area close to California in Oregon that experienced a 5.8 earthquake. And so thankfully, we have not experienced that today, and at least that we know of, right? And so the other thing, I do want to send prayers to those that did experience the earthquake, and I pray that they are safe and just kind of ward off those earthquakes, if you will. So I don't know if this is a season for it, but I will definitely be looking into that a little bit later just to kind of be aware. So anyway, want to get to the month of June. The month of June is National PTSD Awareness Month. And you probably have been seeing my Instagrams out there and my blog posts, basically not so much geared towards PTSD, but more on the emotional component of it, more on the healing component of it, if you will. So what does PTSD stand for? PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. So you see the key word in there, it's stress. And originally it was pretty much geared towards war veterans, coming back from the war. And I believe there was another term that was given, shell shock, that they kind of gave that as they were experiencing depression, probably just continuous thoughts about what happened over there in war. And can you imagine that, being in war? So I'm so thankful for the men and women that have given their lives to help us. But imagine that, going over and being in that type of environment, and you hear stories and trying to come back to have a quote unquote normal life. So anyway, there was a terminology given, and then eventually it ended up being called post-traumatic stress disorder. And eventually it was given a day in June 27th, I believe, by the U.S. Senate. And then the whole month got dedicated to PTSD. And now we know it as it is today, National PTSD Awareness Month. And so I really want to discuss for this week myths. That's what I've been kind of discussing, is myths. A lot of times we hold on to myths regarding expectations of people. We expect them to be a certain way. We expect things to turn out a certain way. And when that doesn't happen, then we end up having all of these emotions, that we're trying to cope with. And so what I've been trying to do is not so much focusing on PTSD, but focusing on the emotional component of PTSD, the mental component of PTSD, the healing component, if you will, of PTSD, because now the terminology goes towards anyone that has experienced a traumatic event. So that's even people that have been physically, sexually, mentally assaulted, people that have been in car crashes or any accident that really kind of throws us off our routine behavior, our routine equilibrium. Because as you know, our body has a way of maintaining balance. And when we interject, when we are a part of experiences that are unwanted or that have some type of horror or shock in them, we have to make sense of that, right? And unfortunately, a lot of times when we make sense of that, we end up blaming ourselves and even blaming other people for what we are going through. And a lot of our emotions just kind of sit there in our heads, and we have these nightmares, we have these dreams, these unwanted frequent thoughts, we have insomnia where we can't sleep, and we're trying to make sense of what happened to us, or what we experienced, and basically separating ourselves from the experience. And one of the ways I did that when I was a little girl, as you probably know my story, if you don't, you can go over to my blog at timikaschambers.com, that when I was 5 years old, after moving away from my father, who was physically, mentally, emotionally abusive towards my mother, we moved away from Memphis and we went to Illinois to stay with some other family members. And shortly after that move, two family members basically took me into the dark wilderness of sexual abuse. And so one was quote unquote nice, one was with force. And as the days went on, and even after the secret was out about the my abuse experience, I myths started unraveling for me. Like I somehow innately I started thinking about my role in the abuse. Not that I'm blaming myself or that I'm the one that caused it, but what were some of the thoughts that I had about people in general? Why did I hold on to a secret for so long? And it wasn't a beat up why. Like I said, it kind of basically unfolded for me because, number one, I didn't want to go through the experience again. So I found myself reaching out to nature and asking nature, I want to be aligned with you. I want to know the truth. I'm praying on my knees at another occasion. I don't know how old I was when I did this, but I dropped on my knees and I just said, basically, I want to know the truth. And so as things unfolded for me, I realized, and I'm going to share with you about 3 of those myths. You can catch the rest of those in part 1 and part 2 of my blog, which is part of accepting my truths, was shining the lights on my myths. And so some of the myths that I had about people was that older individuals are wise and always make the right decisions. And eventually what I had to realize is that wisdom is a choice. Seeking wisdom comes from the heart of the individual. And many times with trauma, you're trying to dig deep as to what happened and how can you make this work for you instead of against you. And that's when I started thinking about the student perspective. What can I learn from this experience so I do not go through it again? And so I realized that wisdom is a choice. And even when I think about my father, and I reported his abuse to another family member, his side of the family. And later on, probably the same day, the next thing I remember is my father berating me for telling basically his secret, the family secret. I had no right to tell. And so even though I went inside doubting, was I the one at wrong for telling the secret? I came out saying, no, I wasn't wrong. He just does not want to admit to what he did. He's still living on the opposite of truth. And for me, wisdom is truth. You gain wisdom, you gain knowledge. And so I had to put that away even after my experience with sexual abuse and just people in general, is that I realized that wisdom is a choice, that just because someone is older does not mean they will always do the right thing. So that's myth number 1, or one of the myths I had, not in any particular order. Another myth that I want to share with you is that all family members care for you and protect you from harm. The truth is, oh my gosh, this is so key, is that everyone experiences anger, jealousy, deceit, vengeance, resentment, shame, guilt. Everyone experiences, if you will, pain. And so many times, unfortunately, often we don't know how to express our pain or deal with our pain. So I believe that we try to give it to other people. We try to share our pain with other people to help unload the burden that we feel inside. And over time, I realized, one of my male family members had a gift of art. He was an artist. His posters were so lively, full of character. And I started over time feeling compassion for him because something got at him that deterred him from full expression of himself without opposing another's will. And so something tore at him. And eventually over time, I got clues of what that was, that my abuse, what he did to me was not about me. It was more about what he was going through. And that is critical in trauma. In many of our traumatic situations is that people tend to try to unload their baggage, and I just had a conversation with someone today, and she said, this person said hurtful things to me. And I said, you know what, when you think about it, when people say hurtful things, many times it's because they're hurting. And they need that safe place or space to express their hurt, but they're expressing it in such a way that it only gives more pain. Because I don't know about you, but when I say something negative, and I really, my conscience catch me, when it does catch me, I feel worse. I don't feel better. I feel bad. So just in summing that myth up is that not everyone, unfortunately, people are in pain. That they may have they may want to do right, but many times that pain can be so seductive. It can be so, heart-wrenching. It can be so imprison you, in such a way that you feel like you have no other choice, but you do have a choice. And the last one that I want to say is that, and many people have spoken about this one, is that telling on family members is breaking the family code. That talking back to others was not the thing to do. They're the ones that are supposed to know what's right. Children are seen and not heard. And so your voice really, if you look at it from a child's point of view, or the other side of point of view, you may be saying for me to shut up as an adult and don't talk. But the other side, flip side of that, is that you're telling me to not use my voice, that my voice doesn't matter. And now, I'm not saying that it's intentional. I'm not saying it to blame other people. I'm just saying that the more we know, the more we understand, the more we demystify these myths and break them down and say, that was one of the beliefs that imprisoned me from not speaking, the more we can be on that path of self-actualization, of fulfilling our purpose and doing what it is that we are here to do. So again, the whole thing about even my memoir, currently titled Bent Not Broken, which is not published yet, but soon to be published, that the whole thing is not about blaming people. It's everything about healing from the inside out. To take the people out of the equation and to put yourself as the center, like when we talk about in nursing, the whole idea about patient-centered care, to put yourself at the center and say, okay, what do I need to do to heal within? And for me, a lot of that was unconscious. But as I got older and went through a lot of stuff, it became a lot of other experiences. My teachings as a child became more conscious. Those are the ones that I relied on to help, keep me out of drama, to help, get me away from drugs, alcohol, and sexual promiscuity, and teenage pregnancy, that I wanted to take care of myself. I had desires in my heart to be more than my experience. So if you will, ask you, what are your myths that you're holding on to? What imprisons us is not what someone else does, but how it is that we feel about ourselves, what are our expectations about other people. And we stay in relationship because we expect them to get better. We expect them to treat us a certain way. But are you seeing that in actuality? Is that your myths, your thoughts, your beliefs? Are those imprisoning you, or are they setting you free? So I hope that you have a fantastic weekend and that you just make this lifetime great. Just because something traumatic has happened to you does not mean that you need to hide behind labels, hide behind diagnosis, hide behind, what others think about you. You are fully capable mentally. As long as, for me, everything is intact mentally, I believe we are capable of healing. I believe we're capable of pushing forward. Now, it's not about having a perfect life, but it's about striving to be who you are deep inside, who you are, the core of who you are. So take care of yourself. Have a blessed weekend. I look forward to next Friday. And this is Timika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle.